Dom, welcome to the show, my man. How are you? How are you?
Very good. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I am fantastic. Very, very excited for this conversation. I think this is gonna be a fun one. Uh, just to jump right in, let's not leave the viewers hanging. I'd love to get a little background on you, people who don't know you, and maybe in a roundabout way, give us a brief background because there's like accepted Bitcoin, especially pre-ordinals. There was like accepted Bitcoin and there's kind of adjacent Bitcoin. But you are still Bitcoiners, and there's a lot of us that kind of fit in that kind of like adjacent category. And I would put Interlay very much in that category. So yeah, just to be brief, because there's a lot to touch on here, but I'd love to get a little bit of your background and then touch on what you and Alexei were working on with Interlay. It'd be great.
Yeah, all right. I got kind of started in Bitcoin or in crypto more generally in 2016. I was super curious about hating the banks and organizations. I was doing my master's in distributed systems during that time. And then through some blog posts and stuff, I read about this idea about the DAO, which like you could invest in like companies all encoded in cool smart contracts and then learn about Ethereum that way. And then the DAO got hacked, Ethereum forks happened, and I was like, oh wow, this space is so cool. I need to work in this space. And then right after that, I kind of decided to start a PhD. That's where I met Alexei, and he was working on Bitcoin. He was the way more hardcore Bitcoiner than me. He was already working on merged mining and kind of extending Bitcoin, scaling Bitcoin. And we started working together on a thing called Xclaim, which is like a protocol to bridge Bitcoin over to other chains. And well, we were the first two guys in that lab at Imperial College, in the cryptocurrency lab, doing our PhDs. And Alexa was like, "Hey, don't you know how to write smart contracts on Ethereum?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I can do that." And he was like, "Okay, I'm building this Exclaim thing. Could you help me write like a prototype for that?" And then we started working together back in like late 2017, early 2018. And then we actually got together and flew to Financial Crypto, which is like an academic cryptography kind of conference. There's a lot of Bitcoin researchers also going there. And then we also went to Scaling Bitcoin in Tokyo in 2018, which was really cool. Back then, everything was still like scaling Bitcoin only with Lightning, and we got one of the last talks on the second day about the wacky other ideas. Actually, I think right before us was the introduction talk for a group called BitGo had just developed WBTC. Um, yeah, and well, now things have changed a few years later, but that was kind of the early start, and really Alexei got me into the Bitcoin side of things. But I was always interested in kind of expanding it beyond its kind of limits. And that's kind of where the whole interlay journey then started. So Web3 Foundation like reached out to us and like, "Oh, we read your X-Claim paper, and wouldn't you want to build that on Polkadot?" And back then it was like quite interesting. Like Polkadot was built on Rust. I was like, I love Rust. It's a cool language. So there was a cool opportunity to build it. And I think kind of the vision, the original vision of Polkadot being like solving interoperability was quite nice in a way. And we aligned with that. So that's where we started the Interlay project. So basically bridging Bitcoin over to Polkadot. And the long-term thing was like, okay, let's get Interlay as like IBTC, the asset, and let's bring it to all the chains via Polkadot. And then, yeah, a few years later, it was like, okay, Polkadot still doesn't have like the full-on interoperability that we wanted it to have, like connections to Ethereum and other chains still kind of lagging behind. And then, yeah, last year, we were thinking about, okay, we still, we started with this idea to bring Bitcoin to the world, to any chain. And what was the reality? Like last year, you had everybody was using centralized versions of Bitcoin on Ethereum mostly, like Rep BTC, TBTC doing quite well, but it's not at the scale yet. And then we kind of reevaluated, you know, um, in which direction should we go, and learned a lot of lessons when you build a startup, right? About kind of building underneath where you actually find adoption, and then that being worthwhile to then solve these hard problems around decentralization. So we kind of decided, okay, let's build something new. Let's make it easier for other people to build on Bitcoin. And then I guess if you ask Bitcoin maxis, probably they hate a little bit what we're doing, taking the OP stack, launching on Ethereum initially, and then solving the hard problems along the way. But that was kind of an important and actually quite conscious step for us. We wanted to launch something that people can use right away. That is, to a certain extent, it is secure enough. Maybe you could totally debate me on that, but at least there's a bunch of other companies that launch with like the same model, like Arbitrum and Base and Optimism. And then, solve BitVM, actually bring in Bitcoin security, work with companies like Babylon to bring like Bitcoin, the asset, as a security mechanism to Bob. And I'm very happy to deep dive on all of these. This is already a long introduction, so I'll kind of stop it here. But I'm very excited about, scaling Bitcoin and allowing people to use Bitcoin, the asset, and Bitcoin, the chain. I think that's quite important.
Now, you opened up 17 can of worms. This is great.
You're welcome.
I think one thing I want to touch, this is just like a footnote, but I've heard those early scaling Bitcoin conferences were just like iconic. Everyone talks about them in like this kind of like nostalgic view. There's a lot of cool shit going on back then. You kind of had to be kind of diehard Bitcoin, but also somewhat technical to go to those, it sounded like.
Yeah, I think actually there were, at least my experience was like, they were extremely open if you're working on technical things. I really loved them for them being very, very tech heavy, but a lot of people, like 600-700 people showing up for extremely technical talks. That's quite rare. And if you come from a techie background, that's your paradise. Building in like not caring so much initially about product and just about technology is fantastic. And it was actually super open for people like me who's just, doing their PhDs. Like there were even grants to travel there and stuff like that. So it was a very welcome community.
Very cool. And one of the things I want to pull on that I've seen with a decent amount of founders that are doing cool shit is they'll sometimes start in academia and then they kind of get burnt out by like just being in the theory land and they want to go build cool shit. And a lot of them also have technical background, so they were writing code, maybe they have a CS degree, and then as they become founders, I assume you guys are writing very little code and you're just kind of like high level vision. So like, is that roughly correct of like theory to practice and writing code to vision?
Yeah, I think that's fairly accurate. I think the hard part in moving over to building a company is that product and actually the business side becomes so much more important. In academia, right, your sales process is like writing a paper and then getting reviewers to eventually accept that, and you never actually really, you never talk to them, you can't talk to them. The only way to interact is you get a reviewer, and then, if you have another chance to rewrite your paper, that's okay. But I think it gives you a very unique opportunity, though, to work very deeply in a certain area. That's why I think a lot of people come out of academia and then start their own company. I think especially people that did their PhD, if they finish it or not. But I think most people in the cryptocurrency lab at Imperial that I worked on have started a company. So there's the Gyro stablecoin on Ethereum that came out of the lab. Then know some people from Cornell. Obviously, there's a lot of people from Cornell that's a company in the blockchain space. There's this whole IC3 conglomerate, basically. There's like a Greek academia mafia as well that are involved in a whole bunch of different crypto companies. This whole Stanford crew. So it's kind of, I think it's a really good opportunity, but there's a ton of learning. Like when you come from academia and suddenly build a product, it's a very, very different game than the academic world. But yeah, it's cool. I like it. I like kind of both. I prefer the building a company, to be honest. Like writing papers isn't my my favorite thing in the world. I rather build products and see people actually use stuff. It makes me more happy.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Cool. Then yeah, I want to jump into what Bob is, and this is kind of a pin for people to think about because as I'm listening to you talk, this idea of building practically keeps coming to mind. This is something I've been kind of thinking about of like a lot of Bitcoin's been so decentralization maxi, trust minimization maxi, and so they don't use anything that isn't perfectly trustless, and we're seeing a lot of those like cracks break, or just adoption super difficult. And so I think that what you guys have done, especially coming from Interlay into the way you've built your roadmap for Bob, is exactly that. This building practically and evolving into the thing. So this is more of a call to action for the people to like keep this in mind as we're listening to the rest of as we go through Bob. But yeah, give us a brief overview, and then we can get into the weeds on what is Bob.
Yeah, let's do that. Right. So when we set out to build Bob, we were like, kind of ordinals were just, on the rise last year. And suddenly there was this new interest to build things with Bitcoin. And I think, ordinals and taproots kind of put the whole thing off. But if, anybody that ever tried to build more complex protocols using Bitcoin script, they will likely tell you that it's possible. You could program stuff on Bitcoin. It is very, very hard to do, and you quickly run into a lot of limitations. So we said like, okay, if we want to like kind of scale Bitcoin, there's probably kind of three key problems that we want to solve. A is you want to have Bitcoin security. That's the most important kind of, it needs to be rooted in Bitcoin security eventually, but it's also the hardest problem on the technical level. Like Alexei and I have been working on that since like, I started on 2017, Alexei before that even. There's techniques like merge mining, whatever not, but until kind of BitVM came about, there wasn't really a good way to solve that. But we said like, that's not the only problem. If you want to build a scaling solution, you also need to solve two other problems. One of them being like the actual ecosystem that you're building up. So you need a bunch of builders, and they need to have opportunity as well. And this is where kind of this practical approach then comes in, but it's also connected to the third thing, which is like, okay, you have ecosystem, you need a bunch of builders, and then you also need, the third thing is like the whole users plus liquidity. You need people that actually use these products and use the things that the ecosystem builders actually built up. And I think, roughly speaking, there tends to be two different kinds of projects. There's usually the pure ecosystem users liquidity play, no care for technology whatsoever. And then there's the pure technology plays, and I think Interlay is a bit more in that direction, or used to be in that direction, quite very technology heavy. We were building and building and building. And the realization we had is like, we actually need to do kind of both at the same time, be quite technology driven, but also pragmatic in a way that you can actually deploy your stuff. You can have users, you can have liquidity. And then we thought about that. Okay, if we want to reach that from first principles, how would we want to go about that? And that's where we made that weird decision to like do this, Bob being a hybrid L2. Let's say, okay, where do we actually, if you have Bitcoin, what do you want to do with that? Usually a lot of people want to have more Bitcoin. So they don't want to sell it. So what do a lot of people do? They borrow stablecoins against their Bitcoin to take out a loan, or they want to stake their Bitcoin. And then we looked, okay, what's the place with the most stable coin on the market right now? It's pretty much Ethereum. And then we were like, okay, can we connect somehow to both? So we looked at the different kind of options, and then OP-Stack is for the people that aren't too deep in like Ethereum scaling, which I can understand, but roughly there's like OP-Stack and Arbitrum Stack, and there's the Darknet stack and zk. There's all these different stacks. OP-Stack has this nicety that it's very close to the ETH2 architecture. So it's very modular in a way, so you can plug in things and take out things. So it allows you to modify the software easily, or at least you can modify it in a way that you only need to modify certain components, but you still stay compatible with components that are developed by other companies. So you kind of make use of that network effect, even on the base, like the roll-up stack layer, essentially. So we kind of decided, okay, let's use the OP stack because apart from optimism, Coinbase was investing heavily in its engineering. Then there's also Restera and Succinct that now build ZK provers on top for OP stack. So there's a lot of innovation happening where we didn't actually need to build things. And then we said, okay, let's roll up to Ethereum first. So we get access to stablecoins and we get access to Bitcoin liquidity that is already bridged over to Ethereum. And then Alexei, he's one of the co-authors on the BitVM2 paper together with Robin. And basically, okay, let's work in parallel on solving this hard Bitcoin security issue while we build up a community and an ecosystem. And let's also find other partners who have that same vision. And that's where kind of then Babylon came in, that had this kind of solution to one very particular engineering problem that we are facing is how do you, if you build a secure bridge to Bitcoin, how do you actually verify that POP itself is correct? And you can use BitVM, you can use merge mining, or you can use kind of Babylon proof of stake, and there's different kind of trade-offs between that. And for us, kind of the Babylon model made the most sense. So that's where we're working towards that final solution. But yeah, in the end, I think it's the three important problems: Bitcoin security, you want ecosystem, and you want to have users and liquidity. And we said, let's build something right now and be on the journey with us to solve this Bitcoin security problem.
Very cool. We'll touch back on most of those real quick though. Is there, for the people in my audience who are not played with Ethereum much, myself included, I've dug deep and I kind of know what OP stack means, but is there corollaries in Bitcoin to this, or is Bitcoin so new that, like, in my mind you have like the L1 of ETH, which is like slow to upgrade, long roadmaps, and everything settles down to it, and then you have all these different kind of like well-funded entities trying to build L2 solutions like Optimism, Arbitrum, ZK Sync, and they do different ways to kind of optimize for ecosystem and building easily. It's too early in Bitcoin. There's no corollaries really to that, or is there something that kind of they can have in their mental of like what that kind of looks like?
Yeah, I think it's kind of close to probably what Alpen Labs is doing with Strata, like having kind of their own stack, and in a way what Chainway and Cetera are doing with their stack. But yeah, it's way earlier. They're all kind of early launch right now. There's also kind of, it's not 100% comparable, I guess. Also, Lightning isn't a good comparison because Lightning is mostly off-chain. You want to process your transactions off-chain, where you just you want to go on-chain when you want to close open a channel, close a channel, or there's a dispute. But by default, you want to be off-chain. Whereas the L2, the Ethereum, you are off-chain from the perspective of Ethereum, but you still have a kind of a chain running with smart contracts. There's just on an L2. So I think Bitcoin is still early in that sense. And it's mostly also because pre-BitVM, nobody really knew how to build a rollup on Bitcoin. And there's still a few open problems that need figuring out and the practicalities of it. How do you keep your operator and set fresh, and how do you actually implement the covenant committee to work around this lack of covenants in Bitcoin? How do you actually, how do you do it in practice? Well, you get a committee together, but then, how does it operate actually securely? There's a lot of open problems still that need solving in the Bitcoin world, yeah.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I do want to touch on these. You have these three goals: Bitcoin security, big ecosystem of applications, and then users. And users probably has a couple pieces. It's like easy UX, and useful products bring in the users, and ideally you get this kind of like flywheel. Um, but those seem relatively obvious. Um, Not to downplay anything you're saying, but like I think most Bitcoin project founders would say that's kind of our North Star. But you guys still came around in this very interesting, like you guys are very unique in what you built. This Bob is kind of a one of one in its construction. Um, so I'm still kind of curious, and I wonder if it comes from building Interlay and seeing how difficult it is to kind of like attract users, even if your tech is best in class. Um, so yeah, I'm just curious on some like a little deeper on this topic because it's saying first principles and these three goals, you still ended up in a very different place. So yeah, enlighten us. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the I mean, I don't know if our whole thing is going to work out. Working very hard towards it, but I think the opinion that we have, and that's probably different to all of the other Bitcoin projects launching right now, their own scaling solutions, is that network effects matter a lot, I think. And I think a lot of the Bitcoin L2s that are being launched right now, they're using the EVM, right? Botanics is using it, the Trail is using it, everybody's kind of using the EVM. There's a level though of network effects and not just technology. So if you use the EVM, like anybody can just deploy your contract, so that we're not really that much different to the other one. I think our network effect is more like if you talk to somebody and ask them to bridge over to your network, they will ask you, okay, what's the initial security assumption where you're still even if you have full BitVM, probably most people will launch with some sort of training wheels attached, where you have some components that are still centralized, right? So like even Lightning, like in theory, fully decentralized, but in practice, a lot of centralized components still in its usage, simplicity, right? And these network effects on the protocol level, that's why we kind of decided to connect to Ethereum in the first place, because you can easily talk to users and you have a very active DeFi user group. I think the initial use case that Bob is focusing on is very clearly is like this BTC Fi or DeFi use cases, and you have an extremely active community, and most big kind of most users on Ethereum, if they're active in DeFi, they usually have Bitcoin. We are all somewhat, or most of us are Bitcoiners. There might be a few maxis who really hate Bitcoin, whatever. I don't care. I'm not a maxi myself, neither Ethereum nor Bitcoin maxi. But yeah, I think most people are quite excited about the cryptocurrency space, the blockchain space being big and like Web3 space being big, and they're just not serviced on Bitcoin right now. They're somewhat serviced on Ethereum, but not really by Bitcoin dedicated projects. That's why we said, like, let's use this market opportunity and let's actually build something that services that community and use that as our initial niche to bootstrap the network.
Interesting. Yeah, I think the network effects matters is I've been trying to think this one a lot. Because definitely users are a network effect, ecosystems, liquidity is, but it's also different in the sense that because these protocols are so open, network effects can move much quicker than in Web 2 space. It's interesting in that way. But you did mention we're connected to Ethereum, and there's other L2s that are using EVM. So like the smart contracts, Solidity, and so there's a lot of Me Too. They're using the network effect and the infrastructure that's already built out for Solidity to not have to teach a new programming language. That makes sense. But you guys are actually, and make sure I'm clear on this point, you're actually connected to Ethereum. So you're EVM and connected, meaning that people can actually, once they're on Bob, they can actually start to use products that are connected to Ethereum, the L1, and swap tokens in that way too. So the connection's that close. Do I have that right?
Yeah. So basically, typically a rollup has one enshrined bridge, which is like that's its native bridge to the main network it connects, and we have this unique maybe a bit of an odd construction where we say, well, we're not a Bitcoin L2, we're also not an Ethereum L2. We're like a hybrid L2, so we're going to enshrine two bridges into the rollup. One is the Ethereum bridge, and one is the Bitcoin BTM bridge that we are working on right now. And I think that's kind of this is the current research that's ongoing. There's a blog post, hopefully a paper coming out in January on this. The trick is going to be Bob is going to be settled, like its consensus is going to be settled on Bitcoin using Babylon, and then we're going to generate a proof from Bob being confirmed on Bitcoin, like a ZK proof, and then we're going to submit that to Ethereum. So to this enshrined Ethereum bridge, so that people that want to withdraw to Ethereum, they basically get a proof that Bob was settled on Bitcoin. So you kind of connect the two, both get Bitcoin security, but on both sides you have an enshrined bridge, so you don't need to trust a third-party bridging provider. All you need to trust is basically that Bob's consensus is correct.
Got it. That's super cool. And then one thing that I think people, this is kind of got to be in the weeds to understand, where you think about trust assumptions, and there's one for moving Bitcoin into a network and ideally getting it back out without having to trust anybody. That's like the historical peg out problem that Bitcoin can't verify, that BitVM is hopefully solving. And then the second one is when you're on the network, it's robust enough that it's hard to attack when it comes to transaction ordering and what is canonical truth on that chain. And it's interesting to me that you guys were building a bridge initially to make Bitcoin use cross-chain, but then you launched and you don't have a canonical bridge. You went to outside third parties, and then you have, so like, give me some color here of like that decision, because I found that pretty interesting.
Yeah, right. So Alexei and I, we've been working on this Bitcoin bridging for a very long time. So there's some fundamental problems in bridging operations in general, which is like the best kind of you can do is you can trust both consensus protocols on two chains. So you want to bridge from chain A to B, like the moment you have a bridge in place, if consensus of chain B fails, so like you bridge from Bitcoin to, I don't know, Polygon, Polygon consensus fails, like your Bitcoin are probably lost. That much you can do because of all the consensus says that these are not unlocked. You're pretty screwed. But then Bitcoin has a special problem of limited smart contracting ability, no governance, or only workarounds. You can't, no introspection. You can't from a Bitcoin transaction that has Bitcoin blocks. So we were like, okay, one of the key issues when you build a bridge is to bootstrap liquidity. But if you build a new bridge, you kind of, but there needs to be a reason to bridge over in the first place, like some sort of opportunity. Like if I tell you, oh, there's this new chain, why should you bridge over? And you're like, yeah, but there's no use case there. Like even if there's close to zero trust assumptions, there's never zero trust assumptions. In the end, you also kind of, unless you're a very good software engineer, you're not going to verify that the code is all correct, even if in theory the protocol is perfect. So kind of to tackle that trade-off, we said like, okay, let's use what's on Ethereum and acknowledge that that is not the end goal, like wrap BTC, or even if it's CBBTC or whatever people's favorite or least favorite version of Bitcoin on Ethereum isn't the end goal. Like we need to get to a stage where we have a proper bridge. But right now, and the time when we launched Bob and wanted to work on this problem, BitVM wasn't yet around. And then even until a few months ago when BitVM 2 was actually kind of finalized, and Robin came up with this idea that we can just verify snarks in BitVM instead of generic computation. And the most important thing is actually snark verification. It wasn't really clear how to, properly solve the problem. And yeah, so we kind of decided, well, if you don't have to bootstrap a whole bunch of liquidity for a bridge, then you can just use wrap BTC and TBTC and CBBTC and LBTC and solve BTC from Ethereum, and you actually don't need to ask these bridging providers through bridge to vault, because you can just enshrine it onto the native bridge and allow people to move it over, then that's really easy to bootstrap an ecosystem. So that's where I guess the kind of the difference came from. On that note, like, I think Interlay is still like, it's a cool design with having over collateralized Bitcoin. So the bridge from a security perspective has a lot of economic security, but it also has scaling issues, right? You always need more collateral than you actually bridging over. And we found that in practice, there's not a lot of people that want to put up that collateral. So it has some sort of limitations on how many people do actually want to have a fully decentralized version of something. If you think about, just to draw an analogy to stablecoins, right? If you think about early DAI, MakerDAO stablecoin, which was single collateral, only ETH, everything was like 150% collateralized in its very first iteration. I think that was the threshold. And then the market cap to USDC and USDT is like, DAI has its place in Ethereum, and it's a bunch of changes, but still, like, the market cap and the volumes of USDC and USDT is just so much larger. It's very hard for over collateralized protocols to compete, and that's where, go back to the Bitcoin bridging example, that's where BitVM is so much better, because it's not rooted in this economic security. It's rooted in proper cryptographic security with a little bit of economic incentives that you need to run.
Yeah. No, I mean, this kind of, for me, goes back to this building practically thing, which is like, Maker sounds cool, DAI sounds cool, just a centralized stablecoin. But again, because it's so inefficient capitally, I mean, 90-something% of the market is in two stablecoins that are fiat backed and centralized. And they have like a small, single digit, even though they're the biggest out there of that type. And let's see here. Had a question, then I lost it. I might have to pivot. Yeah, we can jump in then. We covered a bunch. What do you think, what is the single most unique thing about Bob, in your opinion? Because there's a lot of like, there's UTXO base, there's EVM, off-chain, roll-up. With this kind of L2 boom this past year, and we had L2 mania a year ago, just everyone's launching an L2, including you guys. What, compared to the rest, like the landscape, what is most interesting that you think people should know?
Yeah, I think it's this being connected to both Ethereum and Bitcoin. I think that's the one thing that makes this extremely unique. We think that through kind of combination of the two ecosystems, you get something that's kind of big and is actually beneficial for both sides. And the unique thing is that I think nobody so far has done is to use another chains, in our case, Bitcoin security, to secure a rollup on another chain. And I think nobody yet has upgraded an Ethereum rollup with Bitcoin as a security thing. And that's what I'm extremely excited about for, getting that out of the research phase and into production onto mainnet next year. And yeah, I think that's a cool thing. Like, nobody has done that. And I'm excited about it.
Very cool. You guys just launched something, I think, this morning. So we're recording this on Thursday the 19th. And you just put a tweet out around Bitcoin Secured Network. You have this partnership, I don't know if you'd call it, with Babylon. Say more on that. I read the Cliff Notes, but I'm too left curved to even know what I'm reading. So please enlighten us.
Yeah, right. So we have, on this like BitVM Bitcoin security journey, there's kind of two important partners that we're working on with right now. One is Babylon, and the other one's Fiamma, who are part of the BitVM Alliance. They're for the BitVM bridge, and now I'm getting a tiny bit technical. So to secure bridging with BitVM, the really complicated, or the thing where things can go very wrong is on the withdrawal. If you go back from BOP to Bitcoin, or you go back from any other chain back to Bitcoin using BitVM, you need to basically prove that on Bob or whatever chain you're using to a BitVM instance that the bridge tokens were actually burned, and the person who bridged over received also Bitcoin. Like there's this operator entity, and they let's say you bridge back from Bob to Bitcoin, and I'm the operator. Then you would basically tell me, hey, I want to leave Bob now. Give me back my Bitcoin. I would send you the Bitcoin, and then I go as the operator. I go to this BitVM instance and actually claim back the Bitcoin from that BitVM instance that you originally deposited. And for that, I need a proof, like a snark, and that proof needs to cover that. Well, the bridge Bitcoin were burned, and that I send you the Bitcoin on Bitcoin. It's very hard to build this kind of prover without you being able to attack it. And here's where Babylon comes in and why it's interesting. Babylon has this combination of proof of stake with Bitcoin timestamping. BitVM is secure because it is very hard, like it's only secure if it's very hard to fake this proof. And so in the end, the security of the bridge always comes down to how expensive is it for me to attack it. And for pure BitVM rollup, so where you roll up like something like Citra and Alpine, I think, like once their final designs are kind of out, if you use use BitVM as kind of consensus, as a rollup, and BitVM as a bridge, then your attack vectors, basically you will need to be mining a private Bitcoin chain, so it's proof of work. And the interesting part with Babylon is that you use proof of stake for stakers that basically say, okay, Bob state is now finalized. So you have a group of people that are staked on Bitcoin, and they sign off on the Bob blocks and say, yep, this is now final. But then you put like the signatures and the state onto Bitcoin, and then it needs to be 100 blocks deep for that to be final. So now when you want to attack something that's secured by Babylon, you need to mine a long Bitcoin private fork, and you also need to bribe all the validators. So you get both kind of the proof of stake and the proof of work security, and you get one added benefit that's very useful. You have a deterministic set of validators. So you know exactly who should have signed that. And this deterministic set of validators is very useful in BitVM because it's a stateless light client. You don't have state in Bitcoin, and deterministic things are much easier to reason about in code. And if you use something like, if you use merge mining or generally proof of work security, you can also reason about it. But it's not deterministic, so you have to make a couple of other assumptions that can be like, you have to do some sort of trade-off between security and practicality. So in a very practical sense, for example, you have to make an assumption about the mining difficulty going forward. So BitVM uses the superblock construction, and I won't get into even more technical details. But there's, it's kind of that part is a bit harder. It's not impossible. It's actually also still a bit of a problem for us. But at least the Bob validating Bob is like becomes a deterministic problem, and it only needs a Babylon / Bitcoin like in a BitVM.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm trying to think if we could break this down a little bit for laymen. So that the idea here is something like the Babylon stakers are putting up economic security, and they could be slashed, and they're attesting to something is true, and then at certain checkpoints, those are getting pushed is there proof in this case that's going onto Bitcoin, and that's like a cryptographic hash or something that says, at this time, they all said this is true. So if you wanted to attack, do something fraudulent on the Bitcoin side, you have to also put up enough collateral on the Babylon side to start lying about the past on that side.
Yeah. So it's basically okay. Let me let's say I'm saying like this state of Bob is final, and I have staked Bitcoin on Bitcoin. Actually not in the blockchain. So and now when you come to me and say, "Oh, let's steal a bunch of money from that BitVM bridge," seems quite juicy. But I already said like this state Bob state is final, and now you come to me and try to bribe me. I would need to kind of tell you a competing state, and I would say like, oh, for the sake of this little BitVM thievery that we're gonna do, this is I'll give you my signature. You just need to pay me. Then you go and try to steal from the BitVM instance, but at that point, basically my private key will be revealed when you reveal my second signature, my second state. So I get caught basically in my attempt to steal things. It might still work, but my Bitcoin on Bitcoin will be burned basically, or taken away. My private key, there's a mechanism in Babylon which basically leaks then my private key as a staker, so everybody can just kind of take that Bitcoin out, and I'm losing quite a lot of money. And you as the attacker, you kind of needed to mine 100 Bitcoin blocks on main chain difficulty, which costs you a lot of money. Plus, you need to reimburse me for all of my Bitcoin that I've just lost. So you better steal from a very, very large instance.
Got it. Okay. And make sure I have a sense of blocks, because with rollups, the blocks are quick. But in this case, we're talking about Bitcoin blocks, right? So 100 Bitcoin blocks is roughly a little less than a day if everything's going according to plan. So is this finality roughly takes about a day? Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. So basically, boss finality will be roughly around day, 18 hours if it's the perfect 10-minute block time kind of thing, which it's never perfect with 10 minutes, but yeah, roughly around the day is fine.
Got it. Okay. I think we're starting to come to a close. We covered a ton. You guys are super deep in the BitVM stuff though, and like it's been white paper was released a while ago. Now we're all waiting, hoping it comes and delivers on its promises. Lots of teams working on it. Do you have any, whether it's alpha or just kind of like people that don't know, like where's the bleeding edge of BitVM, and like when potentially, probably early next year, sometime next year, can people start to like play with this stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me start with the play with thing. So we're working together with Siama, and they have a testnet out right now, so you could actually try it out now. I think in terms of
how do you spell that so people can find it?
It's FIAMMA. Yeah, they're also part of this. There's this BitVM alliance with ZeroSync and a few other companies. So I think they're all working quite hard towards like production release. I think sometime Q1, Q2 will be the first kind of production releases on BitVM. I think that's a quite realistic timeline. I think you'll probably have some training wheels still in place here and there where for this covenant emulation, for the covenant committee, there might be some workarounds. There's quite a lot of cost for the transaction, so let's see exactly how that's going to go. But I would imagine we'll for sure next year we'll have production releases of this. People will be able to test it on mainnet, and we'll probably also find the first proper bugs in this in the implementation. But no, I think in terms of the BitVM stuff that we're working on and or also the problems. So biggest problem right now is the light client, specifically the Bitcoin light client in BitVM and the verifier. That's a very tricky one to solve. You need to make some assumptions about Bitcoin's mining difficulty, and if you kind of underestimate, as in the actual mining difficulty is way more difficult than you thought it would be, then the cost to attack it, the BitVM instance, will kind of go down. But if you overestimate it and it actually goes down the mining difficulty, then your funds might be locked in BitVM because let's say BitVM assumes like a certain difficulty that is higher than current Bitcoin mainnet difficulty. Like no Bitcoiner is going to really mine something that's more difficult than actually mining Bitcoin blocks. There's some probability that they find a block with a higher difficulty. Those are the so-called super blocks, and that's a kind of a construction that's used in BitVM. But yeah, I mean, people who want to go in the nitty-gritty details, the BitVM Telegram group is a very good place for that. That being said, so yeah, that's one of the big technical problems. And then I actually think to bring it all back to practicality, there's a bunch of practical issues still need to be figured out. Who's going to be an operator exactly? Because operators will need to kind of, when you bridge out, they will need to put a big advance on the Bitcoin that they're sending out. So let's say you're bridging out 10 Bitcoin, then I as operator first need to send you 10 Bitcoin, and then I reclaim the 10 Bitcoin from the BitVM instance, and that will take 2 weeks-ish if there's no challenge procedure. Challenging also costs a bunch of money, so we'll see who are actually these parties who will act as these operators, because they need to have quite some Bitcoin laying around. I also think that kind of using it in practice, most projects will, that's something that we do as well, combine it with like a mechanism for like normal users, for people like me who don't have 10 Bitcoin at hand. Like I would swap over, I don't know, 0.1 Bitcoin. But that would be like an atomic swap. I actually wouldn't, like I would swap it to a BitVM bridge Bitcoin on Bob. But I wouldn't open up a BitVM instance just because it's not really economically feasible in the sense of the transactions are too expensive from Bitcoin. So for around 10 Bitcoin is kind of the, you kind of want to have more than 10 Bitcoin in a BitVM instance. Below that is just not really worth it. So that's, bring into practice. And then honestly, unrelated to BitVM, interoperability, like from a UX perspective, I think needs to be figured out. We use EVM. A lot of companies or other L2s also use the EVM, but the EVM address format is very different. You need to now create a new wallet. That's annoying. Nobody wants to do that. How is that gonna, look like? I think most people are going to use BitVM next year going to be the early adopters, but then eventually you want to have, I don't know, maybe just you sign in with your email or your Twitter account or something like that, and you have these smart wallets. And I think that's one direction it will likely go. But somewhat unrealistic to BitVM, but yeah, still UX is still a big problem.
Very cool. Okay, let's do a little bit of rapid fire, like 3-4 questions. We're deep in soft fork debates right now. Everyone's fighting over is it CTV, is it OpCat? There's this like chart going around that's really cool, getting everyone's opinions.
Yeah.
What's your take on the current debate? Do you have a favorite opcode upgrade, or are you guys just like building it in spite of it?
Yeah. I would like to have TX hash. I think that would be my favorite. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And then speaking of roadmaps, because I remember at the Bitcoin Renaissance at East Denver, or Denver as we call it, Alexei had this cool like 4 stages of Bob. And I think, did I see that according to, with the new Babylon thing, you guys are now officially in phase 2? So like, could you give us a brief rundown of like, kind of like the what are the phases, and maybe a little bit of like a roadmap? What's coming for Bob?
Right now, so we actually reduced it to 3 phases. So with 3 phases, one is bootstrapping. That's Ethereum rollup. Getting the ecosystem, that's done. Like that's launched. It's live. Second phase is this what we call Bitcoin soft finality. So that having validated, and if something goes wrong, somebody gets slashed on Bitcoin. That's the next phase. That's what we're working on with Babylon right now. And then third phase, that's the full-on Bitcoin security. So you have Bitcoin security for Bob. You have a production BitVM bridge. So you have an enshrined Bitcoin bridge onto Bob. And you use that same Bitcoin security also on Ethereum. And technically, you could, with this hybrid construction, you can technically enshrine a whole bunch of other bridges. You could enshrine a bridge to Solana. You could enshrine a bridge to wherever you would want to. You would use the same security. So Bob could become a hybrid between, I don't know how many chains we want to add, but that's kind of maybe that's the roadmap item 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't know. But
very cool. And you just dropped it. Phase 1 bootstrapping, and it was like a side point, but like ton of work went on to do that. Ecosystem is booming. Give us some quick stats of people who haven't. Everyone kind of has their flavor of L2, and they kind of stay in their pocket. So like, give us some numbers on what's been going on Bob.
Yeah, I think our main liquidity right now is around the Babylon LSTs actually, and RapBTC. That's like the biggest one. I think we're very happy that we have Uniswap on Bob already. So if you want to use a DEX, you can use Uniswap. We also have Sovereign for the rootstock folks that are familiar with Sovereign. They can use that. That's pretty cool as well. In terms of like, there's a few lending protocols. I think Avalon is the biggest one in terms of money market. We have, if we have this pre-launch campaign, Fusion, in which you get like our points, love it and hate it. You also get a bunch of Babylon points now. And we have 550,000 users that qualify for that points program already. So there's a bunch of people that use it. We got like, I think it's like 280 mil on-chain in tokens and 220 or something in DeFi. A lot of people use the DeFi thing. One thing that we're quite happy about is that you can onboard directly from Bitcoin. So if you go to the Bob page, you have not an enshrined bridge, but it's like an atomic swap. So you can get RapBTC, TBTC on Bob directly, or you can stake directly with like Solve or other Babylon LSTs. I think that's kind of the main highlights. I'm the tech guy, where the marketing will know a lot more about the user stats, but I think roughly like 550,000 users and 220-ish mil in TBL. I think that's the adoption stuff.
That's huge. And you dropped some big names. Uniswap already live, which is obviously the biggest swapping provider on ETH. Sovereign, probably, I think the biggest for a while of Bitcoin DeFi that was like focused on Bitcoin. I think I saw just on Twitter, you guys put out like a temp check for getting Aave on. So I really like this idea of pulling in a very concise, specific way. Bitcoiners, if you can, and that kind of like Bitcoin DeFi is so new that it's going to be a slow kind of like bubble, but ETH is huge. So like you can have people it feels the same, and you could end up on Bob without even knowing it. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, my personal pet peeve is kind of, I want to paint like Uniswap orange and Aave orange. So the idea kind of in my head is add native Bitcoin deposits to an Aave UI, add like native Bitcoin access to a Uniswap UI, and kind of facilitate that through Bob. So we have Uniswap. So now our next step is kind of, can we get them to add support that you can swap directly from to Bitcoin? Can we get Aave to add support to directly deposit Bitcoin and then withdraw a stable coin to, I don't know, your bank account and pay back the Bitcoin? So it's like get kind of proven projects on Ethereum, but give them the Bitcoin twist.
100%. Yes, Bitcoin, all the things.
Yeah.
I think last quick question, because people have been hearing this, maybe they're intrigued. What is the easiest way for somebody who wants to try out Bob? What does that user journey look like to go from zero to having some either TBTC or WBTC on the chain?
Yeah. I think the easiest way, if you're a Bitcoiner right now, is you go to app.gobob.xyz. Then you'll land on the bridge page. It will start on Bitcoin, and then you'll You can connect your Bitcoin wallet. Right now, we kind of focus a bit more on the Unisat, Xverse, other people that use web wallets, or OKX. Binance also works. And then you just swap over a little bit of your Bitcoin. You get it into wrap BTC or TBTC, and then you go onto. There's the next page. Is the apps page on the app.go.xyz, and then you can find a bunch of apps that are live on Bob, like Uniswap, for example. Just click on the link and then you can try it out. Do some swaps. When you, that's good to know. When you swap over from Bitcoin, you also get a little bit of ETH, because right now we still use ETH as like the fee currency, but that's all like built into that on-ramp. So it's a single Bitcoin transaction, and then you basically get wrap BTC and you get a bit of ETH, and transaction fees are extremely cheap. I think a swap is less than a cent. And you just go play around a little bit. If you want to stake directly into like a Babylon LST, then you go to the stake page on the app site, and then you can, with a single Bitcoin transaction, you can stake directly into Babylon LSTs or enter into lending markets using like the single Bitcoin transaction.
Awesome. I'll have links below for everyone listening, but man, this has been a great episode. I love what you guys are building. I think we're definitely in the high experimentation phase of Bitcoin, and we need all the kind of like shots on goal that we can to see what works. And you guys got a really unique take. So thanks for coming on, Dom. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you very much. And if anyone has any questions, like, always reach out to us. We're also very open to feedback. And if you want to see something else, let us know. And ideas. Thank you.
Thank you for listening this far into the episode. If you found it enjoyable, please do like, subscribe on whatever platform that you're listening on. YouTube does me a huge favor to like and subscribe. Find me on Twitter at Jake Blockchain. Show me some love. I reply to every DM. And if you are a Bitcoin builder that is kind of at the forefront of building new use cases, whether it's L1, Lightning, Stacks, Rootstock, Rollups, Ordinals, BRC20, I want to talk to you. So when I'm not doing this podcast, I am the sourcing partner at the Bitcoin Frontier Fund, where we invest in Bitcoin startups at the earliest stages, give you access to whatever you need, whether it's legal, product, fundraising help, as well as capital. So love to talk to you. You can hit me up. Again, find me on Twitter at Jake Blockchain and shoot me a DM. I'll read everything. Love to talk to you guys. All right, peace.
It's gone up. We playing the long game to the black rock chains with the rocks paid off from the blockchain. Going up high octane, so we up in here like pomade. Making big noise, big money, go play with your kid toys. You funny, I'm counting my Bitcoin. We up and we been gone. It's gone. Planned it out and we did this purposefully. Panning out like the kitchen currently. It's like surgery, way it's earning me a nurse's salary for cryptocurrency. I'm on a vacay drinking coconuts while wearing polka dots. This ain't no hocus pocus. Listen up and learn. It's gone up.